Warning: the following video will consist of spoilers to copyrighted material owned by DC Comics, Warner Brothers Entertainment Media, RoosterTeeth Animation, and Crunchyroll, as well as light spoilers to content owned by Focus on the Family. The current rights owners to the RWBY Justice League crossover Part 2 film and Adventures in Odyssey audio drama, respectively. The latter of which I'm only bringing up because of a plot point involved in the former. That was borrowed from it and used in the former. All characters, names, references, and ideas are owned by the respective companies. This tirade is of my property and covered under the Fair Rights Usage Act. Just because I say shit doesn't mean you can throw me off. Okay. So I watched a RWBY reactor react to Part 2 of the RWBY Justice League crossover film. That was released yesterday digitally and will be released on Halloween physically. And I'm mad. Spoiler to anyone who guessed Dr. Watts was the one who allowed Felgor to infiltrate Remnant and trap Team RWBY, the Juniper Remnant, and the Justice League in that digital simulation. You were proven correct. But you're wondering, if the start of the movie is basically set shortly after Volume 9, leading into the events of RWBY V10, how did Watts survive? Well, this is where the Adventures in Odyssey element come in. Watts basically pulled a Dr. Blackguard just before his death in Volume 8. Okay, for those wondering who Dr. Blackguard is, he was a primary antagonist in the early albums, the first 25 to 33 of Adventures in Odyssey. But by the end of album 25, physically he was dead. But we find out in a two-parter in album 33, Virtual Realities, appropriately titled Blackguard's Revenge, he had one last trick up his sleeve. Basically, he uploaded his consciousness into the form of a virus in a device known as the Imagination Station. His goal was to basically find one last way to cheat death and resume his criminal activities. But it ends up failing. Basically, his goal was to trick someone dumb enough into using the station so he could upload their mind into his mind into that person's body, using a little girl named Aubrey as bait to lure the main character of the show, John Avery Whitaker, into the station to upload his consciousness into Whit's body. However, this backfires when Whit turns the Imagination Station's virtual hollow simulation program setup against itself by creating a hologram of Whit with an antivirus program inside it. Once Blackguard assimilates with it, it kills him once and for all. Watts essentially does a similar thing, but teams up with Kelgor to essentially trap everyone in the simulation and allow Kelgor to body snatch. Excuse me for a minute. I kind of need to, you know. Sorry, Austin. Had to let one out. Anyway, back to the case at hand. Now, how is it that Watts was similar to Blackard in this case? Simple. Using uploading his consciousness into a digital network as a means to cheat death. Unlike Blackard, who gets killed off, Watts, along with Kilgore, get trapped in a virtual prison created by Cyborg. I don't know why. Personally, it would have been better to just delete the Watts program completely from from both mainframes. I was thinking Lex Luthor was behind it, but in hindsight, Watts did make more sense. That being said, however, Watts and that being said, however, another difference is the motives between. The only other difference between Watts and Blackard is their motives for why they're criminal masterminds. For Watts, it's simple vengeance. Ruby, Weiss, Blake, Yang, the names of the four main girls in a web show created by Rooster Teeth that Vic Mignogna was a part of before he got fired in in the quote unquote, in the bogus sexual harassment and pedophilia scandals he was involved that were thrown at him, Austin. Oh, basically the titular heroic team of the series. But let me get back on top. As that little exposition to one of my viewers, I had to basically get off the track. Anyway, getting back on topic. Watts' goal was simple revenge against those who he believed slighted him of any credibility in Atlas. Blackard, on the other hand, was far more detestable. And believe me, I'm really going to need to go into what deep rabbit hole with this content, as basically Blackard is equivalent to Vicious from Cowboy Bebop in the sense he doesn't pop up in a lot of episodes in AIO, especially from albums 1 through 33, where he is mentioned or does pop up. Of those 425 or so episodes, he only pops up in about 19 of them. But basically, his goal is this: take control of the Wits End, this ice cream shop and Discovery Emporium, mine the tunnels underneath it for a mineral that he could use for a virus that Wit had created, though it was considered a failed project. For those wondering, the virus was called Ruku. Think something equivalent to the bullshit the media pushed with COVID, except that in its regular state, it's useless unless you get it injected directly into the bloodstream. The mineral underneath in the tunnels that were used for the Underground Railroad underneath Wits End contain a compound that Wit and a friend of his, an old colleague of his, created called TA418, which is used as an adaptive agent for the virus, allowing its DNA to bond to whatever it's exposed to. Because without this, it dies almost instantly. Blackard tried every way possible to get the land that building is on. From originally trying to tear down its predecessor, the Fillmore Rec Center, to turn it into a mini mall, got outbid by Wit by $500,000 to do it. Remotely hacking into the Wits End computer to trigger the program that hides the virus formula called applesauce. Wit erased it when he found out what was going on. Stealing a laptop with government info on it. Wit erased the data so Blackard couldn't get his hands on it. Tracking down the co-creator of the virus and by proxy the compound to Switzerland and allying himself with a terrorist cell. Excuse me. Mom. All that ended up doing was allowing Blagger to let himself get injected with an incomplete Roku strain, and then basically type the loose ends of dismantling the terrorist cell and killing its leader to ensure that any loose ends that led back to him were tied up, to ultimately culminating in starting a vandalism crime wave using the local street gang as proxies, making the mayor at the time, Tom Riley, look incompetent. Getting him involved in bogus scandals that Blagger was mainly the contributor to that got Tom elected, and ultimately getting Wits End shut down and then everyone evicted through a quarantine with a bogus story over the mineral. But once everything is exposed, Blagger is cornered. So he tries to suicide bomb Wits End through the tunnel. He's cornered by a wit stand-in at the time, Jack Allen. For those wondering why Jack Allen is doing this, stands in his way in out the end of the 25th album, well, it's a twofold reason. The main reason was Wit's original VA was Hal Smith, aka Otis from the Andy Griffith Show. But sadly, in early 1994, Hal had died of a heart attack, so they needed a new voice actor to replace him. So they came up with a cover story to that Wit was on leave for an archaeological dig in the Middle East, funded by his company, the Universal Press Foundation. To buy time, they brought back one returning character that appeared 2 years previously in a two-part where Wit nearly died, called the Mortal Coil, that being Wit, his youngest son, Jason Whitaker, at the time played by Thom Pinto. Then, when he returns a couple of years later, he's played by Townsend Coleman. The other debuted in the same episode Wit left, Jack Allen, played by the late Alan Young. For those wondering who played Blackguard, it was the late Earl Bowen. Anyway, setting off the bomb, Blackguard ends up killing himself and does a small bit of structural damage, but it does come back. It doesn't do significant damage initially, but time does take its toll, leading to Wits End getting condemned in album 50. But getting back on topic, turns out that in the time that the building had been quarantined and evicted, Blackguard had gotten in and uploaded his consciousness into the Imagination Station. This happens in between the episodes Checkmate and Another Chance in album 25, Darkness Before Dawn, which is, in my view, the best album of the 12 episode albums. Even though it's been surpassed by other albums that have come out since. But that being said, we don't find out Blackguard uploaded his consciousness until the Blackguard's Revenge 2-parter. For those wondering, the episode did air last month on both the Adventures in Odyssey website and on the radio, though only the first part did. The latter was replaced by Bernard and Esther, a 2-parter from album 11. Anyway, Blackguard ends up getting defeated, finally, ultimately, and truly dead. So yeah, do I believe RWBY ripped off AIO in this case? Yes. Will Miles and crew go out of their way to try to defend that they didn't? Yes. But trust me, this was basically a plot point that when I saw that reactor react to the movie, I was like, oh my God, they ripped something off that was done better in an audio drama 24 years earlier. I'm starting to think Rooster Teeth is running out of ideas on how to keep the show afloat. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm willing to stick to the story until it ends in volume 12, which with the way budget cuts have been going, I don't see happening until at best 2027, 2029, between 2027 and 2030. Especially if we go all of 2024 with no RWBY content. And for the and yeah, that's why I'm slipping this video into the RWBY material folder, because I'm a little confused, perplexed, and a little miffed about it. Leave a comment, smash a like, and sub to the channel. This is Mets2128 signing out. Goodbye and good night. Bang.